Okay, so we talked previously about Pareto principle and Pareto in action. I'm going to get a bit more complex here. So I need you to sort of work with me on this one, because what we're going to be talking about here, you've probably never heard of, and that is Pareto Squared. Any mathematicians among you have probably worked out what that means. But what it means is that when we're actually looking at the Pareto principle, 80% of your money is going to come from 20% of your donors. With Pareto Squared, we're going to be looking at what actually happens within those top level donors. So we did an example before. If I have 100,000 people and I get a 10% response rate when I do a mailing, they give an average of $100, I get $1 million of income. Okay, so that was my kind of fictional charity with nice round numbers. What we looked at then was that 80% of that money, that $1 million, which is $800,000, would come from just 20% of the donors, which would be just 2,000 of the donors. That's because 10% of 100,000, of course, is 10,000 donations. And the Pareto principle says that 20% of those people will give me 80% of the money. So I've got 2,000 people giving me $800,000. Pareto Squared is just looking at this group. So we're going to just focus on those top 20,000 donors. And what Pareto Squared is saying is that 80% of this money is going to come from 20% of these donors. Now, in reality, it doesn't quite work like that. It breaks down quite a bit on an individual appeal, but the principle is still the same, and how we're going to behave and implement this is the same. So, if the theory was pure, which is not quite, that would mean that 80% of 800 grand, so 80% of my 80% of my money, so 80% squared of $800,000 is $640,000. Okay, and 20% of my donors is actually 4%. So 20% of 2,000 people is going to be 400 people. So what I've got, for my original 100,000 people, I got a 10% response rate. We're pretending that the response rate is consistent across all groups. That gave me 10,000 donors. Of those 10,000 donors, 20%, which was 2,000, gave me 80% of the money. Of those 2,000 people, 20% of them, 400 of them, gave me 80% of this money, which is $640,000. Okay, so that's Pareto Squared. Where this is important, previously we talked about how it's worthwhile spending more money on my direct mail pack to this group. But with this group, it's worthwhile spending even more money on trying to maximize the income. So let's just pretend that that group of 400 responded at 10%. So that meant I only needed to contact 4,000 of them to make $640,000. As I said before, in reality, it doesn't quite work like that, but it will always work out that a very small minority of donors will actually give quite a large amount of money. It might be that just 10 donors give you 10 or 15% of your total income. Here we're sort of pretending that it's a lot more, but in reality it's always going to be a small, very small number of people giving you a very large amount of money. So let's say these 4,000 people, which is 400 donations in this circumstance, is going to give me such an amount of money. What I might do here is I might do a really fancy pack, but because these people are so important to me, I might go beyond that. I might pop round to them and actually hand deliver that pack, especially if they're geographically handy, as in the same city or something like that. Or I might send them some flowers in advance. So for example, if I worked at a hospital, I might do a deal with a hospital florist and actually send them flowers in advance and say, hey Bob, thank you very much for your continued support of my hospital. Today what I'd like to do is send you these because we thought about you in the office and we decided what we're going to do is say thank you for your continued support. We collected some money, so here's some flowers. You might do a deal with a florist to get those flowers for free, whatever. But what we're doing is really putting a lot of effort and money into maximizing the chance of those people giving, because they give such a disproportionate large amount of money.